I wasn't ready to watch Hamlet do lines of coke at the club. You know what I mean?
I don't think I've ever drunk champagne before breakfast before.
Now I've got a wonderful idea.
Hello, and welcome back to the Movies for Breakfast podcast. I'm your host. My name is Christy, and I already recorded the first 20 minutes of this episode, but it didn't save to my memory card, so we are just starting over with a positive attitude. Hello. Today we're talking about all the movies I watched in April. Now it's May. As I sit here today, I watched 18 movies. 5 of them were from this year, from 2026. A few more were from 2025, and then a bunch of them were just random. So I'm going to go over my general thoughts and a spoiler-free review and rating for each movie. Very rarely do I feel the urge to talk about something with a spoiler in these monthly videos, but if there's something I feel like I have to say and it's a spoiler, I will give ample warning both with my voice in the audio, on screen in the video, and in the description, so you'll be able to avoid spoilers if you so choose. I also want to say thank you to my 5-star reviewing listeners. I posted on my Instagram story, you can follow me on Instagram, that if you leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I will say thank you to you on the pod because it really helps push the podcast out to more listeners. And YouTube is my biggest platform, but on those other ones, I could really use the boost. Anyway, on Spotify, I can't see who leaves me a 5-star rating. So if you do that and you want a shout out on the pod, just DM me a screenshot on Instagram. Otherwise, on Apple Podcasts, I would like to thank Bob Rose, who has been very supportive of the podcast in general. Thank you, Bob, or Timothy Faceneck, as the username on Apple would have it. Thank you to my friend Ji Yoon, my sister Chantal, my friend Panic Pixie. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. On that note, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you'd like. If you're only on YouTube, like this video, comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, send it to your friend. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, or wherever you'd like to follow me at moviesforbreakfast.com, moviesforbreakfast.com. That's my website. And I keep links to everything and all my episodes super organized and nice on there. So check it out. All right. I'll go through these movies in the order in which I watched them. And if I'm looking at my phone, it's because, first of all, look at how cute my phone is. It has a Movies for Breakfast sticker on it. Those stickers came for free with my order of 10,000 business cards, which was nice. If I'm looking at my phone, sorry, it's because I have Letterboxd open and I've been trying to write myself more detailed reviews specifically for these videos. So I'm just going to be checking out my notes and my ratings as I talk. Okay, first movie I watched in April was The Drama, obviously from 2026, starring Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. If you haven't heard about The Drama yet, not sure if you've been on a hiking expedition or whatever, but obviously it's been a huge conversation. I have a full episode on The Drama, so if you want to check out my thoughts in much more depth and detail, you can go watch that episode. But yeah, I had mixed feelings about this movie for much of the same reasons as many people had mixed feelings about the movie. It handles a very sensitive topic in ways that sometimes feel thoughtful and interesting, and sometimes felt clumsy and exploitative and purely for shock value. And depending on where you landed on that reaction probably determines whether or not you enjoyed this movie. And for me, it depends on how I look at it, depends on how much goodwill and credit I want to extend to the writer and director. But otherwise, there were things about it that I really liked. I liked the cinematography, acting. I thought Zendaya and Robert Pattinson both were great. The romance and the chemistry between their two characters was great. So ultimately on The Drama, I landed on 3.5 stars. Yeah, just go watch my full episode on that if you want to hear my whole analysis of it. Okay, next up, I watched The Testament of Anne Lee from 2025, starring Amanda Seyfried, who is basically the reason I checked this movie out because I've just always loved her. And I think she's amazing. I shouldn't say that's the only reason I checked this movie out because I am very interested in cults. I'm interested in Christian fundamentalism in the US especially. And I liked the idea of exploring a female cult leader. I mean, I don't know if it's totally socially accepted to call this a cult, but it's based on the true story of this woman, Anne Lee, who was the leader of this Christian sect called the Shakers, who used like physical movement and dance and what people called like shaking as part of their worship practice. And it is a very fascinating life story for this young woman from, I think from Manchester in the beginning, Northern England. This is like mid 1700s. It goes up to like before the American Revolutionary War. The way that she is able to grow power and followers, very interesting. Power dynamics and gender dynamics, all fertile ground for interesting characters and a movie that I would enjoy. However, it kept hooking me and then losing me and then hooking me again. I found Anne very compelling in her experience of faith, that from a young age, she was passionate about her beliefs. Of course, I'm talking about like the character that we were given in this movie, not about the real life Anne Lee. I'm sure there were some storytelling like liberties taken, but I really enjoyed that character of like a young girl, a young child who is so devout and really has these strong beliefs, a sense of justice, and a commanding presence in a young girl. I was very much moved by the explorations of Anne's experiences of pregnancy and her grief, her marriage, her experiences with sex, all like pieces of something that felt very real and connected to like real womanhood. But she wasn't like a fully fleshed out character who totally made sense to me. I feel like we were a bit too precious about Anne and like unwilling to make her more of a villain that I think at times she must have been. It was too on the side of praising her, lacking criticism. One of the areas where I feel like this film lacked perspective and maybe a slant of criticism where it was due is in how Anne and her group settle in upstate New York. I mean, I'm from Long Island. I call everything north of the Bronx upstate. I'm sorry. I don't actually know exactly where. In the Hudson Valley, I think. Somewhere in the Hudson Valley in New York. They settle. They are fleeing religious persecution, which was true and very real. And they are told by the people in New York City where they landed on their journey from across the... What do people say in a cutesy way? Across the pond. They're told there are these wild people in these lands. Like, you have to be careful. They're violent, about the Native Americans who were living there. And the film, I feel like, tries to do a kind of like wink and a nod to us. Like, oh, we would never talk about Native Americans that way, by showing that they do run into Native people on their journey and they're like super chill and peaceful and just fishing and living in harmony with the land. To me, that's like, okay, maybe that was progressive in like when I was in elementary school. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like enough acknowledgement of this dynamic where Anne Lee and the Shakers are both persecuted and perhaps persecutors or oppressors. They are fleeing persecution. They are just trying to find a place where they can live their way of life. But at the same time, what is the other sinister edge to that is, what are they willing to do to get there? And did they really just walk upstate, sit on a patch of land and never bother anyone? Or was there more to their story and their interactions with Native Americans there? I don't know. Even if not in that way, but like, what's the sinister edge of Anne having so much control as a leader? I feel like this movie kind of took too much the tack of like, if cults were just led by women, they wouldn't be so bad because women aren't so violent as men or so evil as men. And there's something to that. There's something interesting about a cult not being patriarchal but matriarchal, because most cults and most high demand religion and religious sects are patriarchal. So what does a matriarch value? How does a matriarch treat gender and treat people is an interesting question, but it felt a bit too glossy. It felt a bit too much like, yeah, Anne was flawed and she was really strict in her beliefs, but that's just because she loved and wanted to protect everyone. Like, the movie treats her like a second coming of Jesus. And I was just uncomfortable with that and felt like it was not a layered enough portrayal of this complicated real person. And I haven't even brought up yet that this movie was a musical. I have really tried with musicals. I really try to have an open mind. I don't scoff at musicals, but I just don't enjoy them 90% of the time. And what was good, at least in the first third of this movie, is that the musical numbers are incorporated into the reality of the scene. So part of their worship practice, I mentioned, was dancing and shaking in these rhythmic group movements. And as part of that, they also would sing songs. So we're watching them have this worship meeting and they're singing and dancing, but it doesn't require you to kind of enter into a full-blown stage musical, suspend your disbelief, go with it feeling. It's still grounded. And I found those to be like, again, one of the strengths of the movie were those scenes where we're watching them worship and dance, and the choreography is beautiful, the music is beautiful. That's good stuff. But at some point, there's this one musical number, I Am Led. And that's when they like lost me for good. And it was hard to get me back after that because it was so tonally off from the rest of the movie. It was so goofy and weird and camp. And it was also one of the moments where I was like, this could have been a better discussion about land rights and colonialism and religious settlers. Yeah, that was just ridiculous to me. So I didn't get that. On the whole, I think that the actors were great. I think Amanda gave an amazing performance. There were genuine moments of like pain that I just felt with the characters. There were moments that felt really real and raw, but on the whole, as like a cohesive piece of work, this didn't make sense to me, didn't make me think about the things that I was hoping it would make me think about. It didn't teach me things that I wanted to be taught. So this was a disappointment. I gave it 2.5 stars. Also, it was really long, 137 minutes. Okay, it wasn't that long. It felt really long, like torturous. Oh, one more thought I just remembered from seeing a review. The narration. There was narration over it that was so heavy-handed and unnecessary. Like on top of us watching Anne's life story and development, the narrator would just kind of like restate it over that. It very much felt like the movie patting itself on the back in real time. Like, oh, how profound are we? But really I was just kind of like, why are you talking? I already got that. All right, the third movie I watched in April was Anaconda from 2025. This was a cheeky little reboot of the original Anaconda movie starring Paul Rudd and Jack Black. I watched this with my family one night. I think we just were like in the mood for something a little bit sillier, but it was okay. I have not seen the original Anaconda, so I was less acutely aware of this being part of the phenomenon of reboots, remakes, never anything new. And I was more going into it as like, I like these guys. They're usually pretty funny, and this will be just a nice adventure comedy. The characters were good. There were some really good jokes and funny moments. There was some good like tension jump scare moments, but I don't know, there was like an element of stupidness to it that I have a hard time getting behind. And I also just felt annoyed at how much it leaned on being a reference to the original beloved movie in order for me to like it. I think that reboots, remakes should stand on their own, and I don't think that this did stand on its own. Sometimes these Letterboxd reviews other people write, these people crack me up. D. Lamb on Letterboxd gave it 2 stars and said, rebooting a famously bad movie and making it worse is actually quite the achievement. Wyatt Swan says, 3.5 stars. The Anaconda will return in Avengers Doomsday. This caught my attention because it did feel, something about this felt very Marvel Studios Avengers Doomsday, like relying on this like shared goodwill and pop culture knowledge to buy a lot of credit and grace and suspension of disbelief and just go with it from an audience. It felt very much like, yeah, this will be fun, right? People will think that's fun. We're funny. Yeah, let's make it. I mean, I gave it 3.5 stars, so I guess I really enjoyed it in the moment, but in retrospect, I'm kind of leaning more on the side of it being unnecessary. But yeah, I guess I had fun. Next up, I watched Murder in Monaco from 2025. This was a documentary on Netflix about crime, which immediately I did not have high expectations for. I think Netflix is pretty bad at documentaries and pretty bad at exploiting true crime with real victims for cheap stories. I will just say that. One of the little clips that plays when you're scrolling through did it for me. It worked, got my attention. I decided to check it out. And it was better than I expected it to be. It was a very wild and interesting story. I wasn't sure who or what to believe when normally I feel like I have my mind made up pretty well. In like a crazy billionaire murder mystery, normally I feel like I'm just like, well, obviously it was da-da-da. But they got me. Like I went along with the ride and with not knowing exactly what was going on. We took turns we didn't expect to take. We meet an Italian prison cellmate. We learn a little bit more about Monaco and truly what the absurd concentration of wealth is like. And I thought it was pretty good. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Okay, next I watched The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock from 1963. Kind of a random pull. I just had never seen it before. Or maybe I've seen it a long time ago. I couldn't remember if I'd just seen clips or if I ever actually watched it. I'm pretty sure I had never seen it before. And yeah, I just decided to watch it one night with my family. I loved The Birds. It's okay. If you don't know anything about it, like I feel like my impression of it was that it's a horror movie and you'll be scared of birds forever. I am very bad with horror. I get scared by everything. I didn't think it was that scary. I thought it was mostly just dramatic and funny, but I can see how our standards for what is scary, especially on screen, shift and change. And I get why this is considered like, a scary movie. It is wild. The whole concept is it's a small coastal town outside San Francisco, or like pretty far outside San Francisco, that is being flocked by thousands of birds who seem to have some kind of like hive mind or ability to discuss, plan, and execute targeted attacks on places or people. Very bizarre bird behavior, and that like element of paranormal behavior or magical realism is never explicitly explained, but that's the premise, like that's the conflict. And then you follow the people in the town and learn a lot about these characters and get really invested in them not having their eyes gouged out by birds, ideally. I loved it. I don't know. It was a great time. Tippi Hedren is the beautiful heroine of the movie. I think famously Hitchcock loved blondes because blood shows up in high contrast against blonde. Listen, is that why? I don't know, but sure. And she did have incredible shiny hair. Insane name. Tippi is an insane name, but yeah, I really liked her. And then Rod Taylor plays the male lead, Mitch Brenner. So they start off, their like flirtationship starts off with a weird mutual prank. He comes into a bird shop and for some reason she pretends that she works at the bird shop. Like he mistakes her for the cashier and she just goes along with it until he starts realizing that she's messing with him. And then he asks her a bunch of really specific questions he knows she can't answer to corner her about lying. And then in retaliation, partly because she's like humiliated and pissed off and partly because they're heavily flirting, she conducts an elaborate scheme to prank him back. And it involves following him 3 hours up or down the coast, I forgot, to his hometown where he's visiting his mom and much younger sister. She becomes entangled in the town's business and drama and history and in the Brenner family's weird dynamics very quickly. I just loved the dynamic between Melanie, this like shiny, cool city girl, and observing the tensions and long-standing kind of unspoken grievances in this small town and especially within their family. So you feel like her, you feel like a voyeur, an outsider. As the horror of the birds grows, so does Melanie's and your horror at the emotional state of some of these people. The bird scenes are crazy. They do genuinely incite fear, I will say. Have you ever seen that clip of, I think it's Reese Witherspoon, and she's saying how in all of these movies written by men, at some point, the woman in the movie turns to a man and says, "What do we do now?" And Reese Witherspoon makes a joke about how, like, have you ever seen a woman in your life do that? Turn to a man and ask, "What now?" And I remember seeing that clip and I was like, honestly, I don't think I can think of examples of that happening in film. And I couldn't stop thinking about that during this movie because every time something happens with the freaking birds, Melanie, Mitch's mom and Mitch's younger sister and Mitch's ex-girlfriend all turn to him and say, "Mitch, what's happening? Mitch, what do we do?" Guys, Mitch doesn't know. Mitch has been in this situation for as long as you have been in this situation. I kept being genuinely confused as to why they thought Mitch knew something that they didn't. I was like, does he do bird watching as a hobby? Is he into ornithology? Why are we asking Mitch? And then I realized it truly is just a movie from 1963. And that's why we're asking Mitch. But it was so bizarre to watch. And then, yeah, I like literally wrote that in my review before I even looked at anything. And it's the top review on Letterboxd is saying the same thing, pointing out the same thing. So I'm not the only one who was taken aback by this. It's just funny because even the character Mitch is like, I don't know. Okay. But I gave The Birds 4 stars. And I definitely will continue to watch more Hitchcock movies I haven't seen yet. Next, I watched another classic, Breakfast at Tiffany's from 1961, directed by Blake Edwards, but I feel like it's more famously known as being written, the novel version being written by Truman Capote. Truman Capote? I just realized I don't know how to say that out loud. Anyway, this is probably my third time watching it, but the last time I remember watching this movie was like early college, maybe high school, and I'm 26 now, so I was like very happy to revisit it. And all I remembered was that I really liked it, or liked it more than I expected to. If you don't know anything about Breakfast at Tiffany's, you will know and recognize the image of Audrey Hepburn in a long black dress with her long cigarette holder, big sunglasses, hair in a chignon. Like, you will know the image of Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's. And I realized this time around watching it that I never actually understood kind of the central premise of this movie. I don't know if it's because I was too young or because I wasn't like paying attention watching, but it's a very interesting situation. So Holly is Audrey Hepburn's character, and she's this young woman living alone in New York City in the 60s, broke as a joke, like has no furniture in her apartment. She's kind of like a manic pixie dream girl, like an original manic pixie dream girl, always coming in late at night, kind of drunk, and always smoking cigarettes and always on dates with these strange men. And it is heavily implied, if not like overtly stated, that she makes her money that way. So she's like a high-class escort, or maybe what today would be like a yacht girl, although it's very unclear. Like, the extent of the sex work that these characters engage in is really kind of obscure, partly just because of the restrictions of what you could show on screen in 1961. But she makes her money mainly by dating wealthy, powerful men. And sometimes they follow her home and she has to get rid of them somehow. So you feel this sense that she's kind of alone in the world and floating through, unclear what's motivating her, what's driving her. Why is she doing this? Why is she living alone in the city? She meets her neighbor. We're really more from his point of view, getting to know her. He comes to town and he is a writer, very handsome. Who plays him? George Peppard. Yeah, he's so beautiful in this. And he has a sort of sponsor as well. So he's also basically a sex worker. He has a older woman who is married, who pays him to kind of be her boyfriend. Like, again, it's not totally clear like what the parameters are or how explicit it is, but she sees this woman leaving his bedroom and putting cash on the table as she goes. So she figures out, Holly, Audrey Hepburn's character, figures out that they both kind of do this thing. And they get to know each other and fall in love and have arguments about who they are and what they want and what the purpose of living is. And I just really genuinely enjoy it and think it's a lot grittier and more real than I ever like understood it to be before, especially as now a young woman living in New York City alone and trying to figure out what to do with life. It felt very relatable, actually. There's things about it that are incredibly outdated and age horrifically. And the time it came out is not really an excuse. Not that it ever is, but like 1961, like some of this stuff is really bad. There's like some pretty intense racism for comedy's sake in one of the neighbor characters. And it reminded me of The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, where I'm like, okay, we're vibing, we have a shared worldview of something. And then all of a sudden you say something crazily racist. And I'm like, oh, wait, what's going on? So that really tough to watch. I honestly wish they would just cut out those scenes. And then there's, of course, some like casual misogyny, or I don't know. I don't know that the point of view on this is totally fair about sex work and gender, but I think it's trying to have like a sympathetic view, especially to Holly and why she is the way she is and why she does what she does. But there's this like kind of underlying theme of she's broken and he can fix her, and he's very kind of possessive over her. And that's not totally challenged or interrogated. So while there are layers to her being independent, a free thing, she compares herself to her cat. Her cat is named Cat. The cat character is really cute. It's like the cat in Sorry Baby. Anyway, there's layers to that, and it's not as simple as like, oh, well, I'm an independent woman. Of course, no man is an island. We all need people. But the way that he kind of takes that and twists it into the only reason you don't want to be with me is because you're avoiding this truth about yourself and you owe me a relationship and I can fix you and I'm going to fix you. That absolutely makes you cringe. Some of that's pretty intense, especially in like the dialogue. It's like something I feel like falls on a line where I'm willing to engage with it and challenge it and use it as an opportunity to talk about those things and not so much dismiss it as like completely sexist garbage. I don't know if I'm defending it unfairly. Like maybe I'm super nostalgic about this movie and I have a hard time letting it go, and that's why I see everything in the best light, but I don't know. I really find this movie deep. I gave this 4.5 stars and reiterated in my review that George Peppard is so pretty. All right, next up, I watched Into the Inferno from 2016, which is a Werner Herzog. I'm pretty sure you say it Werner and not Werner. Werner Herzog documentary. I think this is my first of his that I've seen. So it's weird and disorienting. So this movie is about, or this documentary is about active volcanoes, the communities that live with active volcanoes, the traditions and cultures that arise from that. But the pacing and editing was so weird. Like, you will think it's a documentary about one thing and then super abruptly jump to something else. And then all of a sudden a third thing and then back to the first thing with little to no connecting tissue between the ideas. That is one problem. Another problem is that the main voice that you hear in this documentary is this volcanologist. I think they're called volcanologists, right? Yeah. And this guy who's the volcanologist, Clive Oppenheimer, I found insufferable. I'm not saying he's a bad person, just from the perspective of like, you're on my screen narrating. I really got bad vibes from him. I felt it was very Orientalist, and the way that he would like talk to and about these like indigenous cultures from all over the world who have a long tradition of living near an active volcano. The way that he talked to and about these people just made me uncomfortable. I feel like he's just like oversimplifying so many different cultural practices and ideas and not approaching with like a real open curiosity, not necessarily always having like respect. I feel like he's kind of entitled to these people's stories and access to their volcanoes. And it didn't feel right. He also is just really, the way that he talks and explains stuff, like as a technical expert, it's hard to toe the line between like saying stuff nobody understands and being really patronizing. And I get that that's like a difficult tightrope to walk, but I somehow found him both patronizing and not making any sense or giving me the actual technical information that I was curious about. So that was tough. On the other hand, to this movie's credit, there were some truly incredible scenes and shots of lava and volcanoes that totally hit me just right. I appreciate that for what it is. I just don't know that the like storytelling and especially the editing of this made any sense. It was very much just relying on the fact that it had these incredible shots and interesting people and just like threw it all together. But it wasn't a story or an argument or an essay. It was hardly even an anthology of stories. It was just footage. It was more like a vlog, if anything. I might have been more open to that kind of stream of consciousness storytelling had I enjoyed the storyteller more, the volcanologist. But because I didn't, I feel like I wasn't generous in other ways either. I landed on 3 stars for Into the Inferno. I will watch more Herzog and see if I like other executions of his style. Next up, I watched You, Me, and Tuscany from 2026. I saw this in theaters. I went by myself. Oh my God. I have so much to say about this movie, and I wrote a really long review, thankfully, so I have notes to remember. But this was bizarre. It's like a celebration of the genre of rom-com. It has pitched itself and marketed itself as like an early 2000s rom-com, sickly sweet, truly romantic and fun and funny. Female lead played by Halle Bailey, who I just think she's cute as a pumpkin pie. I just love her face, and she's so beautiful. But also I knew that she was funny because I've seen clips of like Halle and Chloe live streams that they've done where they like interact with fans, and the clips of them are always hilarious. So I also knew, even though I haven't seen her in like any kind of comedic acting role, but I knew that she is someone with like a sense for comedy, comedic timing, and very funny facial expressions. So I was excited for the calm aspect for her. Love her. And then there's 2 male leads, at least in the like trailer materials. There is Matteo, played by Lorenzo de Moor. And then there is also Regé-Jean Page, who you might know from Bridgerton, who plays Michael. Halle house sits and kind of like inhabits people's lives and plays pretend when she house sits for these like wealthy people. But really, she's pretty broke, and very much free-spirited and adventurous. And when she meets this cute Italian man and he happens to mention this like villa his family owns that nobody is using, she is inspired to take a trip to Italy. I forgot where. Oh, Tuscany. Duh. Chaos with the family ensues. I cannot express enough how bizarre many of the choices in this film felt. Lighting, cinematography, color grading, costume, makeup, editing, dialogue, acting, like so many things I just was really scratching my head about and wondering why they were the way that they were. But this movie was really endearing, and I couldn't decide ultimately to dismiss the whole thing. It just felt like a fever dream. I was right to think that Halle Bailey would be funny and great in a comedic role, and she is. She had me laughing out loud sometimes. And she's also just so cute and precious that the more unlikable qualities of this character, the more questionable behavior, unfortunately, we are shallow, and having someone who is as cute as a button doing them makes it more palatable, which is what makes a rom-com more fun because you don't really have to think too deeply about the morals of these people. But they had her in the worst clothing, and not in a way where I felt like it was trying to be realistic to the fact that she was broke and would not be wearing like nice designer clothes. I'm not saying she has to be wearing that, but it felt like ill-fitting polyester, flammable materials that were styled in the most baffling way. Whereas like other things about her character, like the fact that she is this like savvy New Yorker who admires and watches the lives of rich people, I just don't think that she would be wearing these really outdated clothes that looked cheap and bad. I think she would be like a thrifting queen. I think she would have like a really stylish and cool wardrobe, even if it's not old money elegant, you know? But instead she just looked messy. I don't know. I really didn't like the clothes on her. And I feel like if we're going to make a shiny, squeaky clean, sparkly, rainbows and butterflies rom-com, then you should also give me really cute outfits. She's also in like a permanent 2013 gold shimmer smoky eye. And I said 2013, not 2016. I'm talking like 2013. Super, super outdated makeup. Made no sense. I mean, she's beautiful. You couldn't make her look bad if you tried. She's so cute, but I did not like the makeup at all, especially with the outfits too. I wanted her in like really pretty glowy natural makeup. I don't think she would be wearing a gold shimmery smoky eye. That's not the makeup of a girl who is spontaneous and books a trip to Italy. Do you know what I mean? That girl is wearing like mascara, blush, and lip gloss. Anyway, didn't make sense. I feel like they did her dirty with some of the edit too, where it would look like her character was like really thinking for a second before answering or before delivering her line. And it was so distracting to the point where I thought this must be an editing thing, because if they had just cut that close-up clip of her like half a second shorter, it would have been a totally normal interaction. But instead, like Regé-Jean Page would say something and then it would cut to her and she'd be like, yeah, I was going to say that too. Like the delay on a news reporter. Why are we not cutting the conversation so that it looks like a human conversation that makes sense, you know? Regé-Jean Page, I think he's beautiful. I think he can be really charming. And I thought he was a real like hunk leading man in the Bridgerton season he was in, or it was the first Bridgerton season. But in this, something about him was off-putting. I don't know if they had like a smoothing beauty filter on, or if his teeth are too white or something, but maybe it was the lines they gave him, the way that everything he said was like super husky. He felt like very robotic and kind of ridiculous. However, the setting in Tuscany is so fun. The big fat Italian family are lovely. They were really the highlight for me, like the extended family and the ensemble rom-com vibes. They were really good side characters, which is missing from a lot of contemporary rom-coms for sure. I liked that she is a chef and he's a winemaker. I actually think that's so romantic for them to like share this passion for food and wine together, especially in Italy. That made a lot of sense. I didn't like that the best friend character was like, obviously there was no plot contrivance to get her to go to Italy. So she kind of existed very much in the background over FaceTime and like in New York to deliver these like sassy one-liners that didn't really, I mean, she just didn't need to exist. All of the like normal plot beats where the best friend pushes the main character to do something were actually taken up by the Italian taxi driver who becomes her best friend, which I thought was very cute. Just felt like he was like awkwardly filling in the place of that best friend, but then she still had this best friend back in New York because she needs a best friend. You know, it was just a bit weird. There's a scene where they force a man, I won't say who, to like serenade Hallie's character. It's some like stupid like tradition that seems made up where he has to like sing a song to her. And it's so cringe and so uncomfortable. Like I physically recoiled in my AMC seat, and you can see Hallie kind of like try to hold back a laugh. And then when he finishes, it cuts to her and it does that thing once again where it like lingers on her too long before she starts talking. And she just goes, that was actually really good. And she cannot hide her laughter. Like I could feel her fighting back the cackle. The fact that their best take was her like openly like laughing as she said it in an out of character way. I loved it. Things I didn't like that I haven't already mentioned. At one point, one of the characters says something to another that I think is like an incredibly cruel crossing a red line comment, and they forgive him and gloss over it so quickly with no apology given, just kind of like an implicit apology, not even an implicit like let's make up. It was crazy. I thought this person said something that betrayed like so much hatred and horribleness underneath, and then we all just moved past it like, oh, he just said something in the heat of the moment. Really bizarre, really weird. I did not like that, and like that kind of soured a lot of other things in the movie in retrospective view. You know what I mean? I gave You, Me, and Tuscany 3 stars because I was laughing. Whether it was at or with the movie depended on the moment, but I was laughing. So, okay, we have so many more movies to get through. Next up, I watched Mile End Kicks from 2025 by Chandler Levac. Or Levac. I think it's saying 2025 because it's a Canadian film, but I'm pretty sure it was only released in the US last month. I loved this movie. I think this is probably my favorite movie that I watched in April. I was sent a screener of this movie, which was really exciting because I'm only just now getting sent things like that. But my honest opinion, I really loved this movie. It's kind of a coming of age story. This young woman, played by Barbie Ferreira. She is fresh out of college, living at home, and she decides to move to Montreal for the summer. She is from Toronto, I think. She moves to Montreal to practice her music journalism. There's a big like indie music, poetry, art scene in Montreal. So she goes for the summer and she's supposed to be writing a book about Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, the album, because she is a music journalist. Like she already works as a columnist at a music magazine, but this is the early 2010s. So, I mean, not that this isn't still true now, but the kind of like overt misogyny and mistreatment she faces, her like real dream is to be an author, write a book, do her own thing. She's super passionate about music history, indie music. She is good at what she does, very smart, very motivated. But her plans kind of get thrown off track as she's sucked into the like social scene in Montreal. And that includes her French roommate, who becomes her friend, who's like this very interesting, cool person. And then this indie rock band of boys who she is going to profile and gets to know. Something about this really struck a chord of nostalgia with me. This is like the generation before me. I was growing up seeing these young people as the cool older people. You know what I mean? Like, I was on Tumblr obsessing over girls like the main character in this, Grace Pine, played by Barbie Ferreira. And the clothes that they're wearing, the hair, the makeup, even some of the sense of humor, the social pressures, trying to feel cool, wanting to belong, having no money, it all felt really juicy and real. And I love coming of age stories. Nothing gets me crying like a coming of age story. I think we are all perpetually coming of age, but the like real emotional fragility and sensitivity of a moment where you're finding yourself and the growing pains, this movie really, really hit that spot. I cried. I felt really angry at a lot of our characters for different reasons. I cringed. I remembered moments where I did cringy, embarrassing things too. I just fully, my heart was like beating outside my chest along with this movie, along for the ride. I think everyone should watch this. I think especially if you're like similar to my demographic or have the same memory of like what was cool on the internet around this time, you will heavily vibe with this. I loved the commitment to time and place. I really love when a movie takes inspiration from a very specific setting and has that be present in the story. And this is very specific. This is very much about the Montreal indie scene in the 2010s. And if you are familiar with that intimately, I would love to hear what you thought of this movie and if you felt it was accurate, if it was nostalgic for you. But it was certainly nostalgic for my like imagination of that environment. I loved it. I think Barbie Ferreira is so compelling. Thank God she left Euphoria season 3 to be able to take on other opportunities like this one, because I think she's phenomenal. I think she was spot on in recognizing that her talents were not being used to their full potential on Euphoria. Frankly, I think she's like better than that show. I've never liked Euphoria. I'm proud to say that I am a Sam Levinson hater since forever. And I know a lot of people who did appreciate and like Euphoria are now, that season 3 is coming out, are now saying, you know, recognizing some of these weird things about Sam Levinson and about the show that are falling apart and not making sense. But I truly never connected with it in the first place. So I'm not going to watch it to find out what's changed. Anyway, I'm just really happy for Barbie to be out doing her own thing. She has talent. She's a really compelling actress. You really feel for her, feel mad at her, feel with her, and just love her. And then also the male leads are incredible. Devin Bostick plays Archie. I fell in love with him completely. He is so emotionally raw. He wears his heart on his sleeve. You really believe him and his feelings. Then there's also Chevy, Archie's bandmate. He's played by Stanley Simons, who was also great at being horrible. I wanted to punch him. He reminded me of very specific people I know. And I thought he was the perfect casting, perfect execution of a very difficult role to play, because on paper, this character is irredeemable, but he had to make it make sense why someone like Grace would even be drawn in. And he does make it make sense with his performance. Juliette Gariepi plays Madeline. the French roommate. I love her as well. She was really fantastic. The dynamic between the two of them and their like roommate relationship and friendship is equally present and weighty as the romantic relationships in the movie. And I really appreciated that, especially at that age. I think your platonic friendships and relationships are so foundational and can absolutely affect you just as much, if not more, than romantic entanglements. Yeah, everyone should watch Mile and Kicks. I think it's awesome. I think Chandler Levack is awesome. She also directed Roommates that just came out on Netflix, if you don't know. And I'm going to talk about Roommates at the end of this video because I'm going chronologically through. But yeah, I watched 2 movies from Chandler Levack and I'm obsessed. Thank you. I gave Mile and Kicks 4.5 stars. Next up, I watched maybe an equally favorite movie from April, Happy as Lazzaro from 2018. This is an Italian film directed by Alice Rohrwacher. You may be familiar with the name Alice Rohrwacher if you saw La Chimera or La Chimera. That's what I knew her from. She's incredible. Incredible. This movie was so touching, was so moving. It was very similar stylistically, thematically, and setting to La Chimera, but not in a way that felt repetitive at all, in a way that felt more like an intimate conversation with the artist. Like, I love that she has an artist's fingerprint on her work. I love that she has a voice and a tone and a point of view, and that it comes through beautifully in these movies. So Happy as Lazzaro is kind of a magical realism parable drama. Very hard to pin down genre-wise. Let's see what the description spoiler-free says. Pure-hearted teen Lazzaro is content living as a sharecropper in rural Italy, but an unlikely friendship with the Marquise's son will change his world. Yeah, so he is part of this big family that all live very poor on the land of a Marquise, which is basically like a feudal lord, except she's a lady, and they're sharecroppers. So it's forced labor, but you get to keep some of the goods of the land. They basically keep you indebted to the landowner perpetually, and you have to work to get out of it, and it's like impossible. It's a terrible, horrific, abusive, oppressive system. But Lazzaro is this like, yeah, he is pure-hearted. He works hard, helps everyone, never gets angry. He's portrayed as a little bit maybe like on the spectrum in that he doesn't understand when people are making fun of him or take offense to it, but he's more like a saint who is just superhuman in his like kindness, patience, care for other people. And then the landlady, basically, of the estate and her teenage punk son with bleached hair come to visit. And Lazzaro and this boy become friends and things start changing at the estate. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but something happens and you explore the evolving experience of these people. Sorry to be vague, but I would like to go into this not knowing anything. I did go into it not knowing anything, so I think that's what you should do too. It feels very Italian, like in the sense of being expressive and sensitive and emotional and like passionate, but it's also delicate and it's also funny often. I just was glued to the screen, really touched and moved by this whole movie. It says a lot about like poverty and power and control, how to survive that, practically, physically, but also how do you emotionally survive that? How do you socially survive these circumstances? And yeah, it was just really beautiful and touching. I think everyone should watch it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I like this question that someone puts in their review. Sam on Letterboxd asks, what is the role of a saint in a world that has turned its back on God in favor of capitalism? I think that's a great thesis question, topic question for this movie. And that is what it explores. Okay, next up, I watched Mother Mary from 2026. This is a recent new release starring Anne Hathaway and Michaela Cole. And I wasn't sure what to rate this movie for like 48 hours after seeing it. So that in and of itself, the fact that it kind of scrambled me and made me unsure, I give it some credit because at least it made me think. But it was described, and like the tagline for it is that it's a psychosexual pop thriller. And I remember thinking, what is a psychosexual pop thriller? There's just too many words too many descriptive words back to back. And then I watched it and I walked out and I thought, oh, that was a psychosexual pop thriller. So it did what it set out to do. I think it was marketed pretty appropriately for how it felt to watch. It's an exploration of the dynamic between these two characters. Anne Hathaway plays a very successful pop star known as Mother Mary, and they create this whole pop star persona and brand and songs and performances for the character in the movie. And then her former friend, unclear what their relationship was really like. Like at times it seems possibly romantic. You don't know exactly what the lines are. But this person that she had like a deep connection with, played by Michaela Cole, who is a fashion designer and formerly designed and styled for Mother Mary, for Anne Hathaway. So they are kind of like facing off after years of no contact, after something happened in the past. And then we sort of follow this extended conversation they're having in the present with flashbacks to the past and piece by piece put together what their story and what their connection is. The premise was very interesting to me. I like the idea of there being this suspense, and the thrill is what happened between these two women to make them hate each other. What is this animosity? The nonlinear storytelling I thought worked in the genre and in the tone. I thought the characters were pretty compelling, but there were things about it that just made it hard to fall into. It felt really self-conscious and like self-aware, but not in a good way, you know? Like it felt at times to me like it was awkwardly trying too hard to be spooky or off-putting, and not everything about it had to feel that way. There were some paranormal elements that I thought were done well and I enjoyed. I genuinely did get pretty freaked out at points, especially because I was alone. So there were a couple of scenes where there's like paranormal stuff and I got nervous. But it's not, I don't feel like it was ever super disturbing or like trying to be disturbing, especially, which I was worried about going in. So that was kind of a relief. The issue with it was not, you know, a fault of like weird intentions or exploitativeness of pain and suffering. It was mostly just that it took itself too seriously and tried too hard to be deep and provocative and profound. And really, like, the beauty of this story it's telling is that it's actually quite a basic human experience. It's not super crazy. And so just like felt like trying to add a ton of extra drama and gravitas to everything that would have been much more impactful, in my opinion, if executed with more like simpleness and humility. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean without getting more into it. But yeah, that's mostly just a personal preference. Like maybe on a different day in a different mood, it would have hit me differently. But for whatever reason, I personally felt a little bit distanced from it because of the style of the execution. And because of Anne Hathaway's acting. I talked about this in the Devil Wears Prada 2 episode, which was my last episode that I did. But I think it's nothing, I definitely am not trying to like criticize Anne Hathaway's skill as an actor. I think this is just like a personal issue and a personal preference I have, especially because I've watched so much of her because she's in so many movies that I love. But she's often kind of has her eyes filled with tears about to spill out. Her mouth is just a bit open and kind of stuttering and sniffling. And it's so constant that I just get tired of it. I get tired of watching her kind of be like, but I didn't mean that. And that was this whole movie. If The Devil Wears Prada 2 had a lot of that, this movie was like start to finish Anne Hathaway kind of like blubbering and, you know, stuttering through a nervous sentence. So that just is tiring. Like it just kind of was boring and tiring. And then all of a sudden a bunch of stuff happened. Pacing was off, tone was off. But premise, characters, pretty good to me. And I wasn't mad about it. I was happy to have seen something that felt somewhat original and weird. I think the costume design was really beautiful. And so the incorporation of fashion made sense. I believe maybe not all the dresses, but this one very beautiful dress for the movie was created by Iris Van Herpen, who is like one of the only designers I know, just because I've seen her dresses on the red carpet. And I think they're incredible. She does these like I think she's Dutch. She does these like very sculptural, what's it called? Not a hallucination, like a visual optical illusion. That's it. She makes these like garments that are sort of optical illusions and feel very futuristic, sci-fi, but also fairy and ethereal. Very, very cool designer. And I did enjoy seeing both that dress and the process of making it. It was a good idea, good premise, but there were just moments where I just couldn't take it seriously. I'm sorry. I gave Mother Mary 3 stars. Next up, I watched Hamlet from 2026. So this is a new Hamlet. It just came out last month, at least in theaters near me, starring Riz Ahmed. I went to go see this with my sister. I like Hamlet. I like Shakespeare. I loved Hamlet. I like Riz Ahmed. Let me go see it. I had mixed feelings about this movie. So what I didn't know going in, and I feel like I probably should have been aware of, is that the setting for this whole movie is contemporary London, but all of the text and dialogue is the original Shakespearean text. So you're watching these people in the present day in modern clothes with modern faces and haircuts say things in direct Shakespearean dialogue with a straight face. That's hard to pull off. I don't dislike that choice, but it's hard to pull off. And so I always felt a level of removal from it. Like I couldn't fully be lost in it because I just kept feeling really weird about the clothes these people were wearing and the setting they were in. It did do a good job of like building time and place. The setting was really interesting and had this like sinister vibe. It was shot very dynamically. Something I really struggle with, especially with like stage to screen adaptations, is that a lot of stage plays are very static. Like it's a 3-wall production. And when they adapt it to screen, they don't change that enough. So you end up feeling like you're watching a play through a camera, because why am I just watching these people walk back and forth across a backdrop? This movie very much did not do that. It was often a handheld camera moving like 360 degrees around a subject. It felt really dynamic and had lots of movement and close-ups in it that you don't get from a stage play. So that is like a check to me. I wonder if I would have liked it better if it were that kind of cinematography with the same actors, but not contemporary setting. I don't know if that was a necessary choice. I don't know. It's not a bad choice, and it lent itself to some really fun interpretations because, especially with Shakespeare, like we only have so much context for what these plays, when directed and acted out, would have been like. So there is a lot of room for interpretation and assumption to make about actions that are not on the page or tone of certain lines that could change the meaning. So there were some really fun choices made in this. For example, at the wedding, Hamlet comes out as one of a dance troupe. And I think they're like a South Asian dance group. I don't know what kind of dance. And he's wearing lipstick and like a scarf around his head. That was a really, really, really cool and interesting and fun scene. I just wish I weren't taken aback by moments where we're under a fluorescent light or on a cell phone. I wasn't ready to watch Hamlet do lines of coke at the club. You know what I mean? So maybe it's ahead of its time. Maybe I'm behind my time. I don't know. I gave it 3.5 stars, and that's a pretty good review from me. I just wanted to give it 4 or more stars going into it, I feel like, and there were moments where I felt like it deserved that, but there was something too abstract and far away about it. I also will say, especially with Shakespearean dialogue, especially with British actors, I should have gone to a screening with closed captioning or open captions, because I clearly struggle with some like auditory processing, I think. I don't know. I feel like I have more trouble understanding things in theaters than most people. Or maybe I just go see more movies and obsess over the details of dialogue more. Either way, I at many points could not hear or understand what was being said, which drives me up a wall. Maybe I'll give it another go on streaming with captions one day, but I wouldn't say I don't recommend it. I just think if you go, you should know that that's what you're getting into and that it's kind of long and you have to pay attention to follow what's going on. But I think the acting was fabulous from everyone. I really liked Riz Ahmed in it. I thought he was funny and compelling and sad and crazed and crashing out just right. I really like Joe Alwyn. He plays the like best friend character in this, Laertes. I just thought it was funny because he was also in Hamlet, he was the brother to the main female character. And in this movie, Hamlet, he's also the brother to Ophelia, the main female character. I was a little bit disappointed with Ophelia's story in this, not because the actress was bad. She was fabulous. I just felt like there were areas where they kind of took liberties for Hamlet's development where I wouldn't have minded us taking a couple liberties for Ophelia's story to get more visuals in of it. Like there was like setup for a visual that I thought we were going to get and we didn't get it. Minor critique, but I like the premise. It's just that like in execution, it ended up making me feel a bit alienated. Anyway, that's Hamlet, 3.5 stars. You know what? Maybe I was also in a bit of a bad mood because I went to Alamo Drafthouse Cinemas with my sister in Brooklyn, and we ordered salt and vinegar goldfish popcorn, and there were hardly any goldfish in it, and the salt and vinegar was way too strong. So I didn't get the popcorn that I wanted, and that really ruined my day. So maybe I would have been nicer to Hamlet if I had my popcorn just right. Anyway. Okay, next up I watched Over Your Dead Body from 2026. This just came out. It's like a comedy thriller starring Samara Weaving and I always forget his name, Jason Segel. I was also sent a screener of this, which was really exciting. I normally don't really watch anything on this side of thriller horror. Like there's a fine line, you know, like a thriller comedy, a thriller action, but this felt more like thriller horror or thriller gore, you know, area. But I really like Samara Weaving, especially I saw her in Superman last year. And even though I haven't seen her movies, the Ready or Not movies, I see so many damn previews of those. I feel this like kinship with her. I like her. I think she's funny and beautiful. I like Jason Segel. I watched Freaks and Geeks growing up, so I always have a soft spot for him. So I was like, let's give it a go. And the premise is there are a married couple who kind of hate each other and are going on this like weekend retreat. And you find out pretty early on, so this isn't a spoiler. It's also like in the previews and in the first like 5 minutes of the movie that he is planning to hurt her on this trip. Or I'm avoiding like certain language because of social media algorithms, but to end her life. And it's played for laughs, kind of like their whole dynamic as like a married couple who kind of hate each other is at times funny. You know, chaos ensues and she is violent in defense of herself and other things happen. But that first hump was a little hard for me to get past. I feel like I'm just so aware that men are the most dangerous thing for women, that so many women are killed by their domestic partners. So I don't know, I couldn't get behind the like lightheartedness aspect of that, of being like, can you believe he's going to do this because he's so fed up? I was kind of like, well, yeah, it happens all the time. I was thinking about the Alpine divorce debacle that just went down on the internet about this guy who like kind of seems like he left his partner to die on purpose on a mountain and didn't get help for her, and that actually is kind of common. Like there was too much real world in my head, and I had a hard time getting past that and getting to feeling like this was a quirky toned movie. But I did really like both actors. I did really like at first like the twists and turns. There's a lot of like flashbacks to 2 days before, 1 day before, as you're trying to like piece together what's going to happen. And that was fun, but it got really repetitive. And then there was also one other scene that kind of crossed a boundary that I don't like to see on screen, or at least the concept of which I don't like to see joked about. So I ultimately was alienated by those things, but I don't think that it's like necessarily a bad movie, especially if you like the genre, because if you like the genre and you're used to it, you're probably more likely to not be as bothered by those things as I was. So I think like if that's your thing and you like violence and gore and craziness, go for it. I probably should have known it wasn't going to work for me, but I tried it anyway, and it was in fact a bit too violent and gory for me. But that's just my opinion. I did crack up here and there, but I also I'm just very sensitive. I'm a sensitive viewer. Nothing wrong with that. It's a personal preference. But I was really excited to be sent a screener of this and excited to get to watch it. So I gave it 2.5 stars. Okay, next up, I watched Valley Girl from 1983. This continues a sort of streak of me watching old Nicolas Cage movies. I think I'm obsessed with him. I think he is one of the best actors of his generation. And I cannot believe the misconceptions I had about Nicolas Cage growing up. Okay, if you're around my age, maybe this was just something my school did, but I grew up watching National Treasure like every year in the auditorium at some point in like gym class or something. I don't know why we were always watching this movie, but I have seen National Treasure God knows how many times. I saw National Treasure first and many more times than I saw any kind of Indiana Jones, other explorer type stuff, okay? I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence imprinted into my neurons from a very early age. So I knew Nicolas Cage as kind of a goofy, not very attractive, boring adult man actor, okay? No appeal. When that Nicolas Cage movie came out a couple of years ago, that was like, he plays Nicolas Cage in it, and it's like a self-aware exploration of him being Nicolas Cage, which by the way, I'm going to watch ASAP. When that came out, I remember thinking, really? Nicolas Cage? Like, I don't really get it. I don't get why people are like obsessed with him. I've never been more wrong. Okay. I have now seen Moonstruck, Valley Girl, Wild at Heart, Raising Arizona, and maybe another one I'm forgetting off the top of my head. A ton of old Nicolas Cage movies. And yeah, he's incredible. I get it. I get why people are obsessed with him. He is so dramatic. He's so extra. He's funny. He is very emotionally expressive. I just love watching his performances. He's so weird. So in Valley Girl, this is one of his earliest appearances. He is super young in this. Like, I don't know how old he was when he filmed it, actually. Let me find out. But he's playing like a 17-year-old. Yeah, Nicolas Cage was 18 years old when he starred in Valley Girl. And he very much looks like a teenager. The whole premise is he's like this punk city kid from LA. And he has a crush on a Valley girl who was like the posh, preppy, good girl from the Valley. They cross paths, and it's this whole kind of like, he was a skater boy. She said, see you later, boy. Her friends don't like him. Her friends think he's a punk. But their like love story, even though they're teenagers in this, genuinely so romantic. Nicolas Cage is then typecast into several more roles, which I understand. Maybe not typecast, but he has this like yearning that he does that is so good. He's so good at being like hopelessly just obsessed with, in love with a girl, and it not being cringe because he feels so authentically honest about it. Like, he just has his heart on his sleeve. He yearns for this girl. He goes after her, and they're so sweet together. I don't know. I loved this movie. I didn't expect to like love this movie. I was like yelling at the TV screen, like, Sally doesn't know what's good for her. What does Sally have to say about it? I didn't expect to get so, sucked in, but I did. And all of the friends and side characters have stuff going on as well that's interesting. There were things about this for sure that dated it and made me sad. One of the characters, one of the girls, is put in this box by everyone, by her peers, and also by the movie as being kind of a slut. And obviously this is like a 16-year-old girl, okay? She's like, it's just very weird to center her characterization around her sexual behavior and also to sexualize her so much, and then also to have all the characters demean her for it and us not totally get a like resolution to that. I don't know. It just made her character just made me sad. The way she was treated and the way people talked about her was really depressing. And I don't feel like it was necessarily self-aware. The movie was necessarily self-aware about that completely. I feel like it was a little bit, but not completely. But yeah, I had a great time. I love the Valley girl. She's so cute in this. Deborah Foreman plays Julie Richmond, and she's just adorable. Also, just the accents, the like Valley Girl accents and the lingo they use is so fun. Start to finish, like totally bitchin', I'm sure. Gag me with a spoon. Like, they are full on talking like 80s Valley Girl. That in itself is fun. The clothes, the costumes are great. Yeah, it felt like a very girl movie, and it was directed by a woman, which made sense when I found that out after. Okay, next up I watched Blowout from 1981. This is Brian De Palma, directed by Brian De Palma, starring John Travolta. So I, prior to this, had not seen any Brian De Palma movies that I knew of, and did not very much like John Travolta. I know too much about John Travolta before ever becoming attached to him in a character on a screen to like him. Does that make sense? Like, the movie I knew him from growing up was Grease. And I guess I just didn't like the greasy look because he was not interesting or attractive to me at all in Grease. And I found him really kind of creepy and weird. And then also I've known since like I was aware of Scientology that he is a member of the Church of Scientology. And if you don't know, you can like, you this is not the forum. Like you got to Google it, you know, but celebrity members of Scientology are part of the powerful tier of people in the organization who benefit from the unpaid labor of other people and who are complicit in a lot of the like crimes and abuses that happen in Scientology. So John Travolta, along with Tom Cruise, being some of the most prominent celebrity figures in Scientology, it's like hard to watch a movie with you in it and be like, yay, John Travolta. That being said, I gave this movie a chance because my sister loved it and recommended it so highly, and we tend to have similar taste in movies. Hi, Chantal. She's going to comment, sister mentioned. So I was like, okay, I'll watch it. Watch this with my mom. Regret, because the opening sequence is so vulgar and rated R. It was painful. But I really like this movie. I did really like this movie. The premise is that John Travolta plays a sound engineer for movies, and he's out one night recording some ambient sounds. I think they call it Foley design for movies. And he accidentally witnesses and records the audio of a crime scene. Then he becomes involved in trying to figure out what happened and maybe uncover a sort of conspiracy. It gets crazy. But I really enjoyed John Travolta's performance unexpectedly. I loved the focus on his sound design. All of the like physical equipment and physical media, it felt super tactile and like lots of really fun close-ups on him playing with his gadgets. That I said something about how that reminded me of Wes Anderson. And my mom was like, yeah, but except if it had a point, which I agree with. It was like Wes Anderson kind of like tabletop of stuff if it was relevant to the story in any way. Really liked that. Some really fun lighting and cinematography, very dramatic. And genuinely, I did not know where it was going. Like I was genuinely wrong about a couple of things that I assumed early on were the answer to the mystery or whatever. And that is always a pleasant surprise, not to brag, but I usually figure things out. The female lead, who is part of figuring out this crime with John Travolta's character, is played by Nancy Allen. She plays Sally Medina. And I guess she was one of Brian De Palma's core actors. He's one of those directors who kind of like has the same people star in multiple movies, but she is also in his Dress to Kill, which is the next movie I watched, and I'll talk about Dress to Kill. Something really fun about the cinematography here is like a lot of split screens. So Brian De Palma does multiple types of split screens. He does like a straight up split screen where there's like one video on one side and one video on another side, and you're watching two simultaneous actions, which builds tension really nicely. But then he also does this thing that I just have to look up to remember the name of, called optical split diopters. A split diopter is a half-convex piece of glass placed in front of the camera lens. It bifurcates the focal plane, allowing both the extreme foreground and the distant background to remain in deep, sharp focus. So it splits like the focal range of one shot. So those are more subtle, and I don't know if I would have caught those if I weren't like looking for them. But he does that famously, and he does split screens famously to build tension and action, and it was beautiful to watch. Beautifully executed craft. So tense, so thrilling. I was genuinely on the edge of my seat, constantly trying to piece together, guess, jump around through what was going on. The only things that threw me off are, one, a sort of air of a very present male gaze, and it felt like the women in this movie were unnecessarily like over-sexualized. But the female characters were also interesting enough and dynamic enough that I found them, especially the main heroine, I found her really appealing and interesting and smart. But I feel like the tone of the movie was not treating her that way necessarily. So there's like some misogynistic attitudes embedded in this. And the idea that Jack, played by John Travolta, is this like genius man who will save the day because everyone else is incompetent and corrupt. There's a little bit too much of that. However, just in terms of like action, suspense, thriller, it was basically perfect. One of the villain characters in this is played by a man who looks identical to me to Michael Schumacher from Formula One. And I just kept seeing Michael Schumacher. And that was very distracting. But he was a great actor. Very scary and creepy. I thought the music was really awesome, helped to build suspense and tension, very much so. But yeah, ultimately my reservations about how women are treated in this movie and portrayed in this movie kept it from 5 stars for me. So I gave it 4.5. That's a very, very high rating, right? I was so excited. So many Brian De Palma movies for me to catch up on. Yay. Can't wait to watch more. So the following night, directly after, I watched Dressed to Kill from 1980 by Brian De Palma. This was just a couple of years, 1 year before Blowout came out, okay? My experience of this movie, my perception of Brian De Palma from this movie was so vastly different and so much worse. I really could not get through this movie. I gave it 2 stars. It's hard for me to talk about why unless I get into spoilers, but I'll give you a warning when I do. So for now, the premise is that our main character, who's played by the same woman, Nancy Allen, as a very different character in this one, but also kind of a sex worker in both. Brian De Palma seems very fixated on sex workers, kind of like a Sean Baker predecessor. But she witnesses a murder and then is in danger herself and is racing to figure out who the killer is because the police, again, are kind of incompetent or complicit or whatever it is. Okay, strike one. This movie just reinforced Brian De Palma being super hyperfixated on sexualizing women's bodies, spending a lot of screen time and close-ups on thin, blonde women's boobs in a way where you just think maybe you're directing the wrong kind of film. It's not that I'm squeamish about seeing the nudity. It's that I'm thinking about those young actresses. I'm thinking about not even necessarily young, I'm just thinking about those actresses who get a really cool role with a great script, but then are told that they need to do full nudity a lot. Just why? It's often unnecessary. In Dressed to Kill, it was called for more than in Blowout. It made sense for elements of this story. And even so, it felt gratuitous and kind of exploitative. And if you're going to argue that it's for realism or it's for the grit of what these intimate moments are really like, well, then her makeup shouldn't be on when she wakes up and her hair shouldn't be blown out perfectly. So there's a double standard there. It's not real. It's fantasy. And if you're going to have a fantasy lens on it and it's not real, then you're going to have to kind of justify why it's there. That's a subjective feeling that I get from directors. But once they kind of enter into that radar of I feel that you're creepy and I don't like the way that you look at and talk about women, then that's just the way that I'm going to perceive so many of their decisions and so many of the things that they do, So that, he kind of lost me there on this one. Strike two, the same kind of main character as in Blowout is present here, where it's a misunderstood genius man who is trying to solve a problem or solve a mystery, and everyone else is either evil or incompetent, or a woman who is therefore evil and incompetent. That's not compelling to me. So as much as I still enjoyed his style and suspense and twists and thriller-like moments, those things weren't enough to carry for me the overall message of this film, because what it turns out to be, who the killer turns out to be and why, kind of just killed the whole movie for me. So I'm going to get into spoilers just so I can talk about it explicitly really quick. And I don't really recommend you watch this movie. So honestly, I think it's fine if you hear a spoiler. But if you really do want to watch it, that's fine. Go for it. Skip ahead. I'll put the time in the description and on the screen so you can skip if you don't want to hear spoilers for Dressed to Kill from 1980. Otherwise, I am going to say stuff. Okay, spoilers for Dressed to Kill starting now. Okay, so it turns out that the serial killer in this case is a trans woman who is a psychiatrist character who we know as this male psychiatrist throughout the movie as a benevolent character. And the reason why she, as the female version of this character, is doing these murders is because she resents feeling physical attraction to women. So women who cause her to feel physical attraction as that male psychiatrist trigger her rage and need to reassert her existence, and therefore she murders them. That's me doing my best to explain it logically. For some people, you're with me. I don't even have to explain why that's messed up, but let me explain anyway why I feel like that's really messed up. First of all, just from like a point of view of like understanding what was going on, I was really confused by this character because they were not only trans or what would have probably been called at the time just like cross-dressing, they were also what seemed like having dissociative identity disorder, or what would have been called multiple personalities, or some kind of schizophrenia or amnesia, because the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, or Dr. Jekyll, Miss Hyde thing was like a trigger in this character's brain where they would go from being present and being male to being a totally different person who is a female consciousness. And that just felt more to me like dissociative identity disorder than like any kind of trans experience that I have heard about. I could be wrong. But I felt like it was overemphasizing the like gender aspect, because that was used as like a shorthand for someone being like perverse and messed up and scary. Not that it's better to make out other characteristics that are also like marginalized as scary and bad. Like, not that it's better to say that schizophrenia is scary and twisted, or that people with dissociative identity disorder are murderers and scary and twisted. I mean, I think of the movie like Split, for example. I never understood or saw that because it felt like an obvious villainization of this real mental illness that people suffer from. And this movie managed to kind of take both identities, a like gender identity and a mental illness, and mix them all together and present them as one big perverse mess. It was just really, I don't know, really dark. And like the reason it's so, I feel, harmful is because the idea that trans women are like predators, a danger to cis women, because in this movie, she's specifically killing cis women, is such a talking point of like anti-trans ideology and of the far right, that trans women are trying to find ways to like sneak into women's bathrooms to harm quote unquote real cis women. When in reality, trans women are so much statistically more likely to be killed than to kill someone. They are much more likely to be the victims of violent crime than to perpetrate them. And that's just like indisputable. So that's a really messed up message to send. And I think obviously there's a level of like understanding for context and like social context. This movie came out in 1980. It did not come out this year. To me, that doesn't mean, oh, it's okay, like he didn't know any better. That just means I'm not going to say that Brian De Palma as a person consciously thought to himself, trans women are so scary and dangerous. Let's make a movie where that's the boogeyman. It's that he just, those were the social mores of the time that he was in, and he didn't question them, and he perpetrated them through his work. But that doesn't make it okay. And there's an aspect of self-awareness about this in the movie where at some point the main character, played by this actress, Nancy Allen, is talking to the son of the killer. So his dad, who was a psychiatrist who turned out to be also a woman and a killer. And she's trying to explain to this kid, like, you know, some people feel that they're born in the wrong body and they can get this surgery. It's called something, something, something. She uses like the scientific name for like a sex change operation, as they would have called it. And it's like a very neutral, non-judgmental, non-moralizing conversation about what it is to be trans. So that to me felt like an acknowledgement of the potential harm and an acknowledgement of the, you know, subliminal message of the text while failing to address it properly. Like, that's not really enough to counteract the harm of adding yet another on the stack of stories where this type of person who is really truly like victimized, oppressed, endangered in real life is actually the villain and victimizer in the story. Like, why do we have to add this on top of everything else? So I was so disappointed. And the part of the problem is that you find that out at the end, kind of. So I was just like so disappointed because I'd been playing along trying to solve this crime. And instead of getting to solve the crime, I was just pissed off by the justification. Really not good. This one can stay in 1980. Doesn't change that I liked Blowout, but, you know, this on top of everything else that I've said about Brian De Palma, I side-eye the guy, and I don't particularly like him, but I can still appreciate the aspects of his filmmaking that were really cool and idiosyncratic and special. So that was Dressed to Kill. Okay, next up, I watched Uptown Girls from 2003 for the first time, starring Brittany Murphy and a little Dakota Fanning child. I don't know how I had never seen this movie, but I always see clips of it. It is a very clipped movie on social media. I just finally decided that was the night. Time to watch Uptown Girls. I really like Brittany Murphy. She is the type of person when you see these like pictures and videos of her from when she was alive and you're aware of the fact that she dies so young, it's just heartbreaking to see her so beautiful and young and vibrant and has this like very warm energy. It's just like heartbreaking to watch her. But I, weirdly enough, I knew her from 8 Mile growing up because my sisters and I were little Eminem fans, stans, the OGs. I had the 8 Mile rap battles on my iPod. So I knew her from 8 Mile. And then I knew her from Clueless, of course. This role is different, very different from both of those. The premise is that she is kind of like a Nepo baby orphan who is squandering the money that she has. Just a party girl. She turns 21. She lives in New York City. She mostly just shops and parties. But something happens and she needs money all of a sudden. And she goes to work as the nanny for this very rich little girl, or for the family, but she's always alone. It's always just the little girl, played by Dakota Fanning, and Molly Gunn, played by Brittany Murphy. And they're kind of presented as like polar opposites, right? Molly Gunn is super type B, free-spirited, kind of a hippie, vintage fashion, incredible we'll talk about the fashion. You know, go with the flow. She's cool. Her makeup's always kind of smudged and she has takeout containers in the sink from last night. That type of girl. To Dakota Fanning, this little girl has very much like raging OCD symptoms, very obsessive and kind of a control freak, super neat, clearly has like issues coping because her parents are neglecting her. Like it's not from the outside looking in, you're like, oh, that's a rich child whose parents gave her zero attention or emotional care. And that's probably contributing to these issues she's having. But because they're polar opposites, they kind of butt heads right from the start and have like a power struggle and also like a friendship dynamic that develops over time. It's beautiful to watch. It's so heartfelt. These characters are so deep, even though they have like silly one-liners, and aspects of this felt really campy, especially in the beginning. And Molly Gunn doesn't feel like super redeemable or likable. They both grow through the course of the movie and it gets pretty real and sad. There's like very obvious playing with the idea that Dakota Fanning is like the inner child or younger version of Molly Gunn, who had similar experiences and just like coped with it in a different way. And that Dakota Fanning is looking at Molly Gunn as like the potential future for herself that she's faced with. I bought into it more and more as it went on. Because like I said, it felt a bit silly or tropey in the beginning. And it felt like a lot of what was carrying it was Molly's or Brittany Murphy's incredible wardrobe. So much like, I think like Roberto Cavalli. I need to ask Maria from last podcast. But like these all very like early 2000s kind of like sparkly, frilly, sheer, layered, feminine, beautiful, glam, everything. So fun to watch. And her apartment in New York is obviously crazy. There's like other things. There's romantic plot lines with her and her like career and self-exploration, but really like the relationship between this young woman and little girl is the core vehicle of the story. That in itself as a premise is pretty interesting. And yeah, it ended up being a very touching movie. Both very talented. Dakota Fanning as a child had such subtlety, understanding of complicated themes, really amazing actress. And then, yeah, it was just heartbreaking to watch Brittany Murphy be so vibrant and smiley and lovely, especially because the movie like in part deals with death and loss. So yeah, it got me choked up. I teared up, shed a little tear at the end, but I'm really glad I finally watched Uptown Girls, and I think it was a beautiful movie. I gave it 4 stars. I also hold it accountable for several ill-advised Depop purchases shortly following my completion of the film. Okay, finally, I watched Roommates. Just came out on Netflix, so it's 2026. Also directed by Chandler Levac. I enjoyed this almost as much as I enjoyed Mile End Kicks. I feel like this movie unfairly was kind of getting a bad rap very quickly before I saw it. And then when I saw that it was Chandler Levac and that I had loved Mile End Kicks, I was like, oh, I gotta watch this. So we follow these 2 college roommates, Devin and Celeste, from their like freshman orientation through their freshman year at college at this like small university where they have this like very tumultuous, complicated relationship that I think resonates with a lot of young women and their first like random roommate experience in college. It's told from the point of view of a Sarah Sherman school like dean or something who is trying to mediate a conflict between two roommates that have come in with a dispute in the present. And she's flashing back and telling them this story of these roommates she knew from like 10 years ago. So that's like the layered like storytelling device or whatever. It felt a little unnecessary and sometimes confusing, but I didn't hate it as like a, I don't know, as a way to give the story a purpose, because otherwise I could see it being kind of purposeless. So it being like a lesson, a warning to these other girls, and therefore maybe having some exaggerations about it made it make a bit more sense. I don't know. Basically, Devin is like a very kind of awkward, nerdy, smart girl. She already knows she's going to major in architecture and she's like super passionate about it. She's kind of anxious. She comes from like a, you know, wealthy family who have given her all of the tools and therapy and support. Like she comes from like a very stable background and is just like socially really awkward. Like a normal 17-year-old who's not cool, you know, just trying to find her footing socially. And then her roommate Celeste is like presented as kind of a foil. She's the opposite. She doesn't seem to have a relationship with her family or with her parents and is poor and is super cool and hot and charming and quirky and everybody loves her and she's popular. And so they kind of embrace each other and very quickly become best friends. And in a way, it's like Celeste taking Devin under her wing and making Devin's social life so much more fun and cool and interesting. But she's also like genuinely kind to Devin, and Devin and her genuinely have fun and get along. And then, of course, like things start to go wrong and they have some disagreements and it escalates from there. It was a bit more campy than Mile End Kicks for sure, because where Mile End Kicks felt like horrifically real and like awkward because it was so real, some of these moments felt like the version of the story that you tell with a voice and a perspective, which is why I'm saying it makes sense for Sarah Sherman to be telling the story in the story. But yeah, like some things about it were just more exaggerated and cheesy and campy and Netflixy that I think made it a bit less perfect than Mile End Kicks. But I really enjoyed it. Again, I felt that it was like a pretty heartfelt, pretty grounded coming of age story with elements of like very normal, common shared experiences of finding yourself at college, finding your social group, hanging out with people you probably shouldn't, trying to figure out who are the people you should and shouldn't hang out with, what are the red flags. Navigating like your changing relationship with your family when you first go off to college is often, I think, overlooked. And that was such a huge part of this story as well. I really liked that. I just really enjoyed it. I think the acting was a bit weird and flat, unfortunately, but I think Chandler Leveck has a really, at once, kind of comforting, cozy tone, while also being just like so brutal and so real about like painful and humiliating moments that we all have experienced or feelings we've all felt. She gets that like coming of age nostalgia punch just right for me. So I enjoyed Roommates. One of the common criticisms of this movie, though, that I agree with completely is that one of the characters turns out to just be so exaggeratedly malicious. I agree with that, and I don't think that was a good aspect of the characterization or of the writing, but I don't know. I'm kind of like open to different people's thoughts on that because it really depends on your life experience and what you consider to be realistic or exaggerated. Some of this feels exaggerated. Some of it I wouldn't have believed until it happened to me, you know? So I gave Roommates 4 stars, but I am very excited to see more from Chandler Leveck. I think she's fabulous. Okay, that concludes what I watched in April. I'm going much slower in May. I have a lot going on. It doesn't matter. You don't care. You're here for the movies. Just put the fries in the bag. Just put the movies on the pod. But I have a really fun idea. I think I'm going to start doing, because this is not really like peak movie premiere season. Like there's movies coming out that I'm going to see, but you know, it's not like constant that I want to keep up with full episodes. So because I kind of have breathing room, I don't have to cover a new movie every week. I thought about starting to do more of my like historical deep dives that I've always wanted to do. So for example, maybe like a deep dive video all about Nicolas Cage and his filmography, or a deep dive on like a certain director and their work. Maybe like I could talk about some of the movies that people often cite as like the best movies of all time or their favorite movies and try to analyze why that is. Like The Godfather, Citizen Kane. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions, but I'm excited for a couple of new like episode concepts. My heart's pretty set on Nicolas Cage deep dive. I feel like I really have to do that. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching and or listening. If you've made it to the end, I really appreciate you. Leave me a comment, 5-star rating, review, you know the drill. And I'll be back soon. Okay, bye.